Since its launch in 2005, Broad Street Review has sought to promote the exchange of viewpoints rather than any particular point of view. To that end, we welcome commentary from professionals and amateurs alike about the performing and visual arts, as well as any other field of interest to our eclectic group of contributors. The following interview was submitted to Broad Street Review, powered by Rep Radio. Today, I'm in a familiar place. I'm at the Drake. I'm going to start calling the Drake Rep Radio Studio D because I have 4 places where I primarily do recordings, and this will be D for Drake. Because I told Seth that we should have a booth out in the lobby, call it the Rep Radio Studio booth. I think it would be fun. But I've been having some amazing conversations here, and it's because of all the work that's being produced on the proscenium and in the Louis Bluver. And today's conversation is falls right in line with all of that. So I'm here to talk about Inis Nua's production of Swallow, written by Stef Smith. And Stef Smith is here.
Hello.
Here with us. And I'm also here with director Claire Moyer, who is no stranger to Rep Radio. So welcome back to Rep Radio. And Stef, welcome to Rep Radio.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. So, Swallow. Wow. So, what an experience. There's so much I wanted to talk about, but I couldn't really talk about it without revealing key points of it. But at the same time, I was walking away saying, there's something we're doing in our community. We responded to a question, or we responded to a need, and we've been answering that need without fanfare. And I think you know what I mean. And I really appreciate that. And so that in itself is the reason why you need to come see this production. But you will understand what I mean once you get here. And if you've already gotten here, you get it. But since Stef has come from so far away, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a playwright based in the UK. I actually live in Leeds, which is right bang in the middle of the country. I'm an associate artist at the Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh, where this play was first produced and commissioned.
Scoot up a little bit.
Sure. I've got quite a soft-spoken voice.
It's a lovely voice.
Thank you. Thanks. You know what? People really struggle to understand me in Philly. I think I speak quite quickly and quite softly. So, yeah, I've had a lot of people ask me to repeat my orders. But so anyway, I'm an associate artist at the Traverse, where this play was first produced and commissioned. I actually trained to be a director in Edinburgh. I did a degree where you got to specialise in a particular aspect of theatre making, and I actually specialised in directing, but have actually, I think, directed maybe 1 or 2 things since graduating. I predominantly work as a playwright, and I find that feeds me creatively, so that's what I do. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting. There's so many artists in our community who, focused on one thing and ended up finding that that their expertise would lie somewhere else. We have playwrights who ended up being directors. We have actors who ended up being playwrights. So it's always amazing that I think that everything we learn in theater in general allows us to find a way to sort of settle into where the world wants us to shine.
Sure, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, so tell us about Swallow. And then I'm going to ask when Inis Nua first experienced Swallow.
Cool. So Swallow was first performed at the Edinburgh Festival in 2015, but it was actually commissioned, I think, about 2.5 years before that by the artistic director Orla O'Loughlin. And it came about from a few aspects, really. One of them was my frustration about the lack of what I thought were contemporary roles for contemporary women. I had seen lots of pieces about the experience of men, young men on stage.
The plays that don't pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And they're brilliant plays made by brilliant people. But I was very aware that I wasn't seeing people like myself on stage. And that's not to say this piece is not at all autobiographic. But I suppose I wasn't seeing women who were allowed to be messy on stage. And certainly didn't feel like they were reflecting people of my generation. And also then I expanded that question outwards because one of the narratives that the piece deals with is a character who's transgender. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my work in general deals with underrepresented voices. So I had this conversation with Orla, and it was fascinating and brilliant, and I went away and wrote Swallow very quickly, actually. The first draft was written very quickly and intensively. And then we spent 2 years on and off refining it, developing it, and then, it got to the stage. So that's roughly its story, I suppose. Through
that process, was there more story than we see on stage now?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I think a few things got lost in the editing process. I tend to write very full, overwritten, some might say, first drafts. And then I go through a process of slowly peeling back what I need to make something a bit more economic and sparse. Yeah. There were definitely moments that were in the play that didn't make it to the final production. Mm-hmm. And so, we sort of slowly stripped back. And when people come and see it, they'll see that it sort of splices between time, and there's big jump cuts, and it's not sort of a linear story, although it is chronological. Mm-hmm. And so, there definitely were parts of the story. And also, I think one of the things that makes Swallow quite interesting, I think, is that there are no stage directions. And there's no clear... It's also not broken up into scenes, so it's just one big long stream of consciousness, really. And it's up to the actors and the director and the designers to find punctuation within it, whether that's emotional punctuation or punctuation with lighting and sound. And I think Claire's done a wonderful job of finding those moments. And so I think that's also... I sort of invite the company to fill in the gaps, I suppose, where I've left them.
Yeah. So Claire.
Yeah.
What was when did tell me about when you experienced Swallow for the first time?
Sure, yeah. Our artistic director, Tom Ring, goes to the Edinburgh Festival every year and sees dozens of plays. And he usually comes back with a stack of them for me to read that he's particularly excited about or thought were interesting or might fit our company. And after he went in 2015, Swallow was one of the ones he brought back and was particularly excited about it, and very kindly and generously was excited about the idea of me directing it, which I was really excited about as well. And I read it and was totally there and was totally ready to give this a whirl. So at that point, we had our season picked for 2015, 2016. So we started kind of negotiating what it might be for this current season, and sort of which slot and where it would be. But it's been about a year and a half of me having this script, and I had originally the printed script, which is slightly different than what we worked off today. Not massively different.
No, I mean, this is another conversation, but the nature of publishing plays, new plays, is that quite often they continue to change in preview. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny, I don't think any of my plays, the published version, are quite what gets performed. Yeah. Because you do end up, again, I mean, this is my process, but I do end up usually cutting and editing even in the preview process. So, yeah, Swallow's a bit... It's not massively different.
No.
I think there are just sort of almost whole sections that I've cut, but nothing that would change the narrative.
No, the stories are pretty similar. It's just there's little bits of information, or sometimes things have been like reattributed to different points and different characters. But yeah, I sort of similar to what Steph was talking about. I also am really passionate about seeing, especially women on stage who aren't represented in the way we see in other stories, and passionate about working with getting female playwrights work on stage, and female designers, and designers and artists who don't always get to do the work they want to be doing or see themselves on stage. So that was a big thing for me with this play. And then also that it is like sort of deceptively simple. I really love that it's a play about kind of how difficult and dark and confusing normal life can be. And I think that's something that we kind of, like when we're looking for drama on stage, we create these like very heightened situations. And it's not that there aren't sort of some heightened elements to this play, I guess, but and the poetry of it is, but that there's this sort of like this everyday struggle of these characters that is incredibly important to them and hard for them, and in a way that, like, if you're walking down the street and pass this person, you would just never know. But it doesn't mean it's less important. The phrase I keep using is that they're sort of fighting for their lives, but in a small, intimate kind of way.
Yeah. One of my thoughts after seeing the production was that it felt very poetic, and that's why I asked, were there elements that were cut from it, because it feels like it's like, you know what, I'm gonna strip it down so that just the essentials are here. And I know we do that with the process of revision, but it was so apparent here. And it felt like it was like, yes, just looking at the scenic design too, we're looking at, it's like, there are pieces missing on purpose. It's like our thought to kind of fill in those gaps, in those cracks.
Yeah, so, one of the first things the character Anna says is fragments placed so precisely. And I think that reflects the form of the play. It's very fragmented, and that's a recurring image in the play. There's lots of smashing things up, smashing mirrors, smashing glass, and this idea that we're all reflected in each other, and we're all fragments of each other. And I think that's something that I was really interested in showing, and that I think, just to pick up on Claire's point, that all these characters are very present because they're sort of in survival mode, in a very quiet way. And I think that sparseness brings a sort of present tense to it. They're all very much in the moment because they have to be, because they're trying to get through something or trying to figure something out. Or and I always say that this play is almost like a series of tiny earthquakes, and I think they could. I feel like all these characters could be any one of us, given the right circumstance, given the right sort of environment. These characters are maybe not as extreme as people would first imagine.
Yeah, I always try to resist. I always try to resist saying, it's a slice of life, but it's really what it is. I mean, I sort of walked away saying, yeah, we just sort of thank you for letting us into their worlds for this brief moment in time. That was what I took away from that. So tell us about these characters. We have Anna. Is it Anna or Anna?
Anna.
It's Anna, Rebecca, and Sam.
Yeah.
And so tell us about them and where they are.
Sure. I think it's hard not to give spoilers, but I suppose I'll talk about where they are at the start of the play. You've got Rebecca, who is. Well, she thinks that she's just about to reconcile with her fiancé, but actually she finds out that he has met somebody else, and they haven't seen each other for just under 6 months. And she is very shocked to find out that this life that she had planned for herself and him is not act, the one moving forward. And she rather angrily and drunkenly storms out into the night. Then you've got Anna, who is a recluse. She hasn't left her flat in nearly 2 years, and is sort of obsessed with craft, and is making these funny little bizarre abstract pieces of artwork in her house. To what end, we find out later on in the play.
Yeah.
And then you've got Sam, who is watching himself smoke in the mirror and is trying to learn how to hold a cigarette, in the thought to look more like Sammy Davis Jr., somebody sort of quite suave and gentlemanly like. And you find out through the course of the play that he is transgender, transitioning from female to male, and is at the very, very early stages of transition and figuring out what that might mean for him personally, and the kind of man he wants to be in the world and what that means. So yeah, that's where they're all at the start of the play, and it goes on from there. Yeah.
Sam's character resonated with me because I love the reveal of Sam throughout the story. I love how it just subtly mentions moments, and you're just like, I'm tuned in now. Not that I wasn't tuned in before, but it's like, wow, there's a journey here, and we're exploring this journey along with Sam figuring things out.
Yeah, exactly. It's very present for him, and I think the thing that is about with Sam and all the characters that it deals with parts of their identity as a whole, and in a very intersectional way. You know, I think Sam is a transgender character, but that's not just who he is. He also wants to be a lover and a boyfriend, and he loves his work. And it's about how complex all of our identities are. It's not. I was really loath for any of them, or with Anna and her obvious manifestations of her declining mental health. You know, yes, that's one aspect to her, but she's also an artist, and she's playful and she's funny, and Rebecca might be heartbroken and potentially relies on alcohol a bit too much, but she's also like really dark-witted and cutting and intelligent and fierce. And I think with all these characters, I wanted to allow them to be as complex as possible, because ultimately we all are. None of us are one part of our identity. We're a collection of things.
I see Rebecca in that moment where from now on it's me. It's about me. You know, I see like these realizations of her maybe putting herself last, or not necessarily last, but definitely not first for a long time, and then all of this, you know, pulls into this reality of like, I'm done with that. Yeah, I'm done with that. I've got to move forward. I made a note that these characters take a pause. There's this moment where they all just sort of freeze in time and kind of assess the situation, figure out what's going on with their lives, and figure out how to move forward. And at the end, it's you know, also poetic and beautiful how they decide to move on. Yeah. And I also thought with Anna, I said, you know, where are the landlords during this whole thing? I would have been like, we need to talk about your design choices. And you're going to put this back when you move out, right? And I guess if you're following the story before that point of dialogue makes it clear, you're kind of thinking like, how is she getting away with this? Yeah. And how much time is passing?
Yeah. I mean, I think I think the interesting thing about Anna, and quite often people have lots of questions about her after seeing the play, is how much of her world is real. Yeah. You know, I think there's a big question about. I remember when we were doing the production in Edinburgh, Emily Wachter, who played Anna, we had lots of discussions about how much she's actually doing. You know, she describes all these monumental things she's doing to her flat. You know, she's tearing up floorboards and taking off cupboard doors, where actually there's a world in which she's just standing still. You know, like, so I think there's
that element of dialogue where she points out, she puts her fingers on the window, and it's all intact.
Yeah, and she thinks...
And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Did we... Was
What's really
any of that?
happened?
And or was that just is that just what she needed to play through in her mind to realize that it was much bigger than this, and that she needs...
Yeah, I mean, she talks about doing these really physical things, but then at the same time is like, I'm tired and I haven't fed myself in weeks.
Yeah.
So we had a similar conversation where we kind of, at a certain point, were like, is she actually doing the things she thinks or wants to be doing? Or is she just sort of rendered herself incapable at a certain point?
Yeah. I talked to your costume designer at opening night.
Natalia?
Yeah. Natalia. I actually didn't realize that we had a long history knowing each other. It was kind of cool. But I asked her, I was like, what were your first thoughts? And she said, well, I read it several times, and there was a moment where I just focused on the individual characters and just followed their through line. And when I thought about that, I was like, yeah, it's like if you go back to this piece and just highlight Anna and just read through Anna, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And go back and read through Rebecca, what does that look like? And go back through Sam, and what does that look like?
We did that bit in rehearsals, actually. Like, we'd look at a section and we would divide it out, not because we didn't know we would be doing it all together, but just because it would allow the actors to kind of connect things through. Especially, I think, for Corinna, who's playing Anna, is that there's this sort of like, there are these jumps in her timeline, and she has fewer opportunities, I think, with like sort of real conversation, at least early on in the play, in the way that Sam and Rebecca do. So we would like tackle sort of a chunk that felt like it had a sort of beginning, middle, end to it, and had a flow to it, and divide it out. And sometimes it was looking at 3 sort of monologues that were broken up, and sometimes it was a scene with 2 people and 1 person speaking monologues and things like that. And I think it helped. This was very early on, but it really helped, I think, kind of make those through lines for the actors and see where there were those jump cuts versus where there were the things that connected in ways we hadn't always realized. And I think the actors also did a beautiful job as we processed through kind of realizing like where there were connections in the piece that hadn't initially been apparent, where it sort of almost feels, I think this was particularly with like Sam and Rebecca have these scenes, and often Anna's sort of speaking at the same time, and where what Anna's saying sort of feels a little bit like it's reflecting the scenes or the moments, or you're finding these sort of like connections between the sort of emotional point they're at, or the storytelling that they're doing that weren't maybe initially clear to us.
Yeah. Well, it does appear to me that it plays out in a way that centralizes Rebecca, because there's a later conversation that Sam has with Anna, where Sam's profession sort of steps in and creates that sort of opportunity to connect with Anna for a brief moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Rebecca is the sort of connection point between
absolutely.
Absolutely.
She's sort of she's the connection between the 3 of them. She's sort of the middle one, if you will. I think word count wise, I'm pretty sure everyone says roughly the same amount, but but I think sort of, as you say, relationship wise, she's definitely the center point because she connects the other 2. Yeah.
Did you all? Oh,
no, it's okay.
Did you always know the production was going to be called Swallow?
Yeah, it's funny. Somebody asked me that yesterday, and yes, I spend quite a lot of time thinking about titles of my plays, which I'm sure every writer does, and I very, very rarely change from my first idea, which I tend to get very early while in the middle of writing it, if not. Sometimes I have the title before I even know what the play is. And I remember when I was writing, when I first sat down to write Swallow, it was in my kitchen. And I had 3 images that I worked from in my mind, fictional images. And I got to about page 20, and somebody said the word swallow. And I went, oh, okay, cool. And so I took it and put it at the top of the page, bold, underlined, made it like made it size 14 instead of 12, which is what I usually work on, and it's stuck ever since.
And that was sort of my thinking too. It was like there are moments when the characters say it, and the way it shows up, it's like, looking back on this should probably be called Swallow.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about in rehearsal, we were having this discussion about like the actor who plays Sammy, he was like, oh, I say Swallow, and the actress who played Anna was like, oh, I say Swallow too, and we're like, oh, Rebecca never says it. Oh, well, that's funny. And we were a few days in rehearsal, and we went back to the start, and we're like doing a bit of reading from the start, and we got to the point where Rebecca does in fact say Swallow very early on in the play, and they all cheered, and I was like, what? What's going on? She said Swallow, and we're like, oh yeah, and we're like really kind of like excited, but I totally missed it. I was like totally behind on the whole thing.
And this one is such a simple title. It's not like I don't know, like, and then there were none or something like that. If that ends up being part of the dialogue, you would look at each other and go, that's the title of the play.
Yeah. No, that's totally true. And it's, I think it's interesting, it also refers to the bird swallow, because the character of Anna is obsessed with birds, and because she hasn't left her apartment, but she watches them outside her window. That's sort of her main preoccupation. But actually, the bird of Swallow is never mentioned in the play, quite purposefully. So yeah, it's sort of that double meaning. And when the play gets translated into other languages, quite often I end up having quite a long conversation with the translator about the title, like should they go for the bird, should they go for the action? Because as far as I've encountered, it's only English that means both the bird and the action. So, yeah, tricky.
Okay, then that answers my question, because I was going to say, so why not use a swallow?
You mean in the story, as far as the birds in the story?
So later,
but that's only really a question here.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, laterally in the play, Anna befriends a particular bird, who she cares for, and the symbolism behind that particular bird, which is a pelican, I don't think that's too much of a reveal.
It's all in pieces. You have to come see it. You bought tickets, right? Did you buy one for your friend? Okay, go back into the website, get a ticket for your friend.
This will all make a lot more sense.
Well, wait. Did you get it yet? All right. I'm going to hold you to it.
I'll see you there. So yes, she befriends a pelican, which has particular symbolism in actually the Catholic Church, but a lot of belief systems have a pelican as a reoccurring image of self-sacrifice, solidity, survival, and a swallow. First of all, it was too small of a bird. They're really small birds. They're beautiful, but they're small. And I just felt like it didn't have the weight and also the otherness. A pelican's such, unless you're from Florida, like a pelican's quite a strange bird. Like we can all sort of half conjure an image of a pelican, but probably very few of us have never seen one outside of a zoo. And so...
And they're huge.
They're huge. When you look at them, they're like, some of them can be like 5 feet. They're massive.
Well, it's also, I mean... You made the right choices. It's also more fitting at the end because that conversation is like, but we're so far from and I hope he chose life. I hope he makes it. And we're just like, wow, okay. All right.
There's lots to unpick with the pelican.
I felt like everyone in the lobby just needed to cook on it for a minute. Because everyone I talked to, I was like, "What were you thinking?" And they're like, "I'm still digesting."
It's not.
I'm still processing.
I think it's not a play where you instantly finish it and go. Because it's, I suppose with something like a comedy, you can sort of go out and go, I find this bit funny.
Yeah, you'd be like, that's that funny moment with the thing.
Whereas this plays, I mean, it's hopefully very emotional. And not easy, it's not, I say to everyone, it's not an easy play. But hopefully it's a very humane play, human play. And so, I think that's right. I think it does take a minute or two to, I mean, I know what's going to happen, and I always a moment or two afterwards. So
I think it's quite... It's quite subtle, even though, like you said, you allow your characters to be quite messy. I think it's quite subtle in sort of the stories that are being told and the kind of restraint, again, like that there isn't, like Darnell said, like there's not a massive amount in the text that isn't it's all very necessary, but there's never more than you need. It's very precise, it's very subtle, it's very spare in a way that I think kind of can like sneak up on you. Like you're just sort of like, it's this very simple thing. I understand this. I understand what's happening here. And then as it develops, the sort of emotional life of these characters and the experiences they have, and how they affect you emotionally. Like I myself, you know, like I said, I've been thinking about this play for a year and a half. We rehearsed for 3 weeks and then move into previews. And I myself am still find these moments that kind of like actually move me quite a lot, because there's this like deftness to how it's constructed and the subtlety that that never becomes indulgent when in stories where like I feel like you could, if you wanted to, you could like let these characters sort of wallow, but because they are all fighting, there's this constant there's this action and this need to survive behind them that doesn't allow them to become indulgent characters.
Yeah. This play could have been called Mess.
Mess, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately there was a play called Mess, which was a
Again, you made the right choices.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure.
Who are these characters in your life?
You mean like, do they represent people? Yeah, I mean, they're not. As I say, none of them represent my life story. Although I think, you know, I'm a firm believer that in the specific lies the universal. So although I've never had these particular life experiences, I felt lonely and sad and angry and frustrated, as we all have. And so I think, there's nobody who they are specifically based on in my life. They're sort of a mixture of things I've felt, things I've witnessed in other people. So there's nobody specific they're based on, I suppose is what I'm saying.
What were some of the audience responses that you both received?
Generally quite positive. I can't think of anything. Some of the responses sort of give stuff away, but my dad got really excited about the Catholic iconography of pelicans, which was exciting, I think. You know, like people find, like you're saying, like there's this sort of, in the specific as the universal, there are these things that people kind of, within it, that people I think latch onto.
Yeah.
But
I mean, people have been very moved with this production. A lot of not many dry eyes by the end. And I think I remember on second preview we went to a bar afterwards to talk. It was very professional. And a gentleman who had watched it came up to us, didn't he? And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, these stories need to be told because they're not easy. And I think that's, I think there are people who it chimes with very personally, who have had similar experiences, who probably feel a very hot sort of emotional response to it. But a lot of people, I think, can see parts of themselves. I hope they can. So usually people have been very emotional.
Yeah, and I think people have responded to sort of what we've been talking about, is that like there's this like simplicity and poetry in it that kind of allows you to experience those emotions because the characters and the actors themselves are kind of trying so hard to find their way through them as well, and trying to find control over them. That the desire for control that these characters have allows the audience actually maybe to experience the emotions a little bit more than if the actors were sort of doing it for you.
And there's this validation of universality in it too, because the play was written, originally produced for Traverse Theatre, and so the thought process would be maybe that audience processed this differently than an American audience processed it. But the struggles, the conflicts of all these characters are very visible. They're very real. I mean, they're not things that they're not far-fetched. You can say, "Oh, wow, yeah. I've been in a breakup, that a relationship that didn't go in the direction I wanted to. we've had moments where we're trying to figure out who we are, and we have moments where we just want to detach from the world completely and just feel like, can I just get a week? Can I just get a week? Like, I turn everything off and detach. I'm going to create a funk in this apartment. Like if you're sick for like 2 days, the reason I was thinking about that apartment is because, like, if I'm sick for 2 days, my apartment is a mess. It's ridiculous how much I could accumulate just by staying home. It's like, nope, you have to get up every day and go to work, because if not, you're going to make a mess of this place. It's gonna be...
I think that's most people. Yeah. But I think what's interesting about Swallow is it's been translated to several different languages, and I'm in the very privileged position of it's been done quite a few times, everywhere from Brazil to Turkey to Australia, and lots of places in between. So I think there's something of this play that does speak across cultures, which is, it's a phenomenal thing. I've never experienced it like. I've never had another experience with one of my plays that's had so many lives. And in a way that makes me feel a bit sad, because it is a play about survival and struggle. And, I suppose it makes you feel less alone to know that all these people in all these places are struggling and fighting in the same way that we were in the Traverse in 2015,
But you created a blueprint, and the world took it and said, thank you. And that's lovely. Because that says so many it's like 1,000 words in this now. So you can just kind of say this. It's enough. What do you hope the audience will take away from this experience?
Well, I always say that the reason, one of the reasons that I am a playwright is to help people feel less alone. And so I hope by showing these stories on stage, that people go. It's funny, the published version starts with the Frida Kahlo quote, which I would paraphrase horribly, but the essence of it is, she's sitting alone thinking there must be someone out there who's as weird as I am. And I hope that's what that play offers to the audience, that they go, oh, I felt that sad, that low, that excited, that happy, that horny, whatever it is. And so I hope in the smallest of ways it makes people feel less alone.
Right. Claire?
I'm not sure I can say it better than how Steph just did, but I think I create theater because you're in a room with people having these experiences in this deeply intimate, live and hopefully warm, even when it is a play that deals with things this difficult, that there's this sort of like invitation to participate in a way that you don't get when you're watching TV or a film. And so I feel like having a play that allows for characters to be this vulnerable and struggle this much is important, because when we walk out the door, we don't let people see how much we are struggling, and we don't let people see those things we feel that are are beyond us. And so to sit in an audience and allow people to be that open and raw and honest about it is really important.
Yeah.
We should also say that there are some jokes in it. It's not.
It's
not a sad fest. Yeah. There are some jokes. There's love and there's sex and there's passion. And
and actually, I think you've done a great job. We often talk about how you've done a great job in the script. We talked about this in rehearsal. Of, when things get really hard, there's always something a little bit lighter, like a page. Yeah. You have that moment where you can breathe again after it.
And it's subtle. It's really there's necessary. A part of you that's like, that was funny.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, are we supposed to be one way in this to totally process it? Or, yes.
But that's
life, isn't it, right? In the same moment that you're having the absolute worst day of your life, something ridiculous can happen and something deeply funny, and, allowing that, human beings are incredibly complex and can experience more than one emotion at once.
Yeah. Well, it's like when people, there's always, I can't remember, there's some phrase about how much sex people have at funerals, because there's something about being so close to death that it makes you want life.
Yeah.
And so people always have lots of sex apparently after funerals.
I know. I always think there's always a film where it's like after a tragedy, it's always like the most passionate sex scene comes over after.
Yeah, there's a lot going on for these characters. You know, they are struggling, but they're also alive in the world and meeting new people and loving and caring about certain things too.
And I always say quite often when directors are going to do this play, they want me to talk to them about it, but I usually just say, just find your own way. But the one thing I always say is, this is not a play about death, it's a play about life and people living. And I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, I would agree.
Choose life.
Choose life.
The play is called Swallow. It's being produced by Inis Nua Theatre Company, and it's on the proscenium at the Drake. And you can get your tickets now. You got them already.
I just wanted to make one plug. We're doing programming with the Mental Health Association of Southeastern Pennsylvania. So if you donate travel-sized toiletries, you get $5 off a regular price ticket. Or you can just bring toiletries. These go to day centers that support people who are dealing with mental health issues, many of whom are using these day centers because they are homeless or between housing. But also this organization specifically deals with creating community and peer support. And with a play like this, which is so much about people, you know, who are part of their loneliness comes from not having someone to talk to and not being able to express how they're feeling. Organizations like the Mental Health Association of Southeastern Pennsylvania are doing the things that we are talking about as artists.
And there's a box at the box office.
There is.
That you can drop those in.
Thanks.
And one other thing, just for fun. Who had to clean up at the after party?
Oh, that's our... Oh, well, the after party technically didn't happen. But the after party was cleaned up by our amazing general manager.
We went and had margaritas afterwards.
We did, yeah. I guess we did have an after party.
Yeah.
It was not quite as rowdy as it was promised.
No, everyone was shattered. I mean, the one thing that we haven't spoken about is how phenomenal the cast is. You know, they're three brilliant performers, and I think everyone was just exhausted by the end of press performance. So we didn't stay out too late, did we?
No, we were pretty well behaved.
Well, get your tickets. This production is not to be missed. If you got the email that said it's not to be missed, it's not. So, Claire, Stef, thank you so much for chatting with me about this piece. And I hope listeners out there have already experienced it. If you've not, I hope this has enticed you to come experience Swallow here at the proscenium on the Drake. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Broad Street Review, the website where art and ideas meet. Since 2005, BroadStreetReview.com is the place knowledgeable Philadelphians turn for honest, independent, and passionate criticism and commentary about Philadelphia's dynamic arts scene. Join the conversation. It's free. You can reach Broad Street Review online at BroadStreetReview.com. Follow us on Twitter at Broad Street Review and like us on Facebook. To show your support for this podcast and our Philadelphia area arts coverage, please go to BroadStreetReview.com and click the button at the top of the page that says Contribute. Thank you for helping to keep the conversation going.